I'm Emily Francis, and welcome to the special Holy Land Uncovered episode on location in Magdala, believed to be the home of the famous Mary Magdalene, a contemporary of Jesus. We'll take a look at the first century synagogue here and learn more about the mysterious woman who is still inspiring people around the world. Welcome back to this special episode of Holy Land Uncovered. We are here in Magdala, and I'm joined now by Father Juan Solana, who is the director of Magdala and the visionary behind this beautiful place. Thank you for having us.
It is my pleasure. Thank you to you.
So how did you go from being from Mexico and ending up here in Magdala, building this dream location?
It's a very long journey, but I was in New York, and I was told to come to Jerusalem to be the director of the Notre Dame Center. So I got here in November 2004, and a week later I came for the first time to the Sea of Galilee. And the very first night I was here, I wake up very early in the morning, went down to see the sunrise on the Sea of Galilee. And I was watching that when a fisherman came with a little boat, came all the way and started to throw his nets just a couple of yards away from me. And it was so impressive moment for me that I started to dream. What can I do here? What can I do here? What can I do here? I was dreaming for a couple of months, and eventually what you see here in Magdala is what I dream in those moments.
Wow, wow, and to be doing something where so much happened. I mean, what can you tell us about the importance of Magdala and even Mary Magdalene in the story of Christianity? And I know there's not a lot said about her, but she's still very relevant, being a woman, being the one who saw Jesus being crucified, saw him, you know, when he disappeared from his tomb. Why is this such an important component of Christianity?
First of all, this place before was an old resort called Hawaii Beach. So it was not so inspirational, I would say. And when we removed the cabins that were here in this resort and we started to prepare the land for the construction, we ran into the archaeology and we discovered only 1 foot underneath the town of Mary Magdalene, first century town.
You know, nothing is coincidence. If you're being a spiritual person, we know that nothing is a coincidence. Things are meant to be as they're meant to be. For this to be uncovered, for this hotel to be here, for Corona hopefully being over, tourism coming back, what do you think it has to do with kind of the lasting legacy of Mary Magdalene herself?
Look, this is a long story also because my mom herself had a very strong experience about Mary Magdalene. She told me that when I was a teenager, so I kept Mary Magdalene in the back of my mind. When I came here the first time, passing by, and they say, this is Magdala, it seems to me like there is something here. Then I started looking for a piece of land, and they told me there is a piece of land on sale. Where? In Magdala. In that moment, I saw the connected points, and I felt so much strength to do this that I started, and really I felt myself guided and driven many times, I suppose by God, to fulfill this dream and to bring about this place of encounter.
Father Solana, thank you so much for your time and for putting together something that is such a treasure for people who live here and for people who are able to take the journey to Israel and be in Magdala. I really appreciate your hospitality.
All the work to come to Israel and to enjoy these beautiful, amazing, rich places.
From your lips to God's ears. We're going to take a short break. Please don't go anywhere. We have much more for you right here from Magdala. Stay tuned. Welcome back to this special episode of Holy Land Uncovered. I'm Emily Francis. The Magdala stone is one of the most important recent archaeological discoveries in the Holy Land, dating back to this 1st century CE synagogue here in the Galilee. This is a replica, but the original has recently been restored and returned home right here. Here's more in this next report.
13 years after it was first found, the Magdala stone, perhaps one of the most important archaeological discoveries in recent years, is back in its hometown.
This moment is very exciting because I have been waiting for it almost 14 years since I say goodbye to the stone at the beginning of January 2010. So it's a great joy to see the stone coming back home and shed a new light on the site, on the history, many beautiful things.
The story of Magdala goes back 2,000 years. It is associated with Mary Magdalene, who according to the Gospel was one of Jesus' close circle of followers who saw his crucifixion and resurrection. The ancient synagogue here is a rare evidence of flourishing Jewish life here in the Second Temple era. The Magdala stone is, perhaps, the jewel in the crown, a magnificent item decorated with beautiful symbols.
In this panel, we found the menorah sign. The menorah is a Jewish symbol. That's the first time that we found this kind of symbol, the menorah symbol, outside of Jerusalem.
A few months ago, a new section of Magdala was discovered across the street, suggesting that this ancient city was even bigger than one thought. For many scholars, the Magdala stone is significant because it may indicate what the Second Temple looked like.
It's a representation of the temple, and it's with all of the elements. It's like the presence of God in the temple. We have all the elements that will be in the Second Temple before that the Roman destroyed in the 70, and we have here a representation like a model of the Temple of Jerusalem with some elements from the Santa and the Santa Sanctorum. It's just a representation to give the opportunity to try to imagine how the people who get the allowed to be inside to the Santa Sanctorum to feeling the presence of God in the temple.
This unique item is now on display at the Magdala Hotel, a new compound which was built here on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Visitors can see here one of the only items which remained intact for nearly 2,000 years.
And we're now very happy to be joined by Professor Mordechai Aviam of Kinneret College, here to talk about this incredible location. Hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So tell us where we're standing and why this is such an important part of the history of the Second Temple time.
We are standing in one of the great discoveries of Galilee during the Roman period, maybe one of the great discoveries of entire land of Israel. In this period, we have a Second Temple period synagogue in the Galilee, the first one that was found in the Galilee, an area in which Jesus Christ was visiting, teaching, preaching, and for many years people were asking, where are the synagogues that Jesus visited?
Yeah.
For example, he was reading the Torah and teaching in Nazareth. We don't have a Second Temple period synagogue in Nazareth. He was preaching at Capernaum. Capernaum, the synagogue is much later. So where are the synagogues? Finally, 2009, the first one was discovered, the first one in the Galilee. We do have synagogues from the Second Temple period. Earlier, we have them at Masada, at Herodium, at Gamla in the Golan. Most scholars said there were no synagogues. There were only private houses that people gathered, and Jesus came to talk to them, and other people came to speak over there, to read the Torah. But there was not a building which is a synagogue. Until the first one were found, as I said, Masada, Herodium, and then Gamla, but in the Galilee there was none. So 2009, we have savage excavations here at Magdala, and the first building that was found is this building, which was identified immediately by the excavators and by scholars after as a synagogue, a Galilean synagogue of the Second Temple period. It was built somewhere in the first third of the first century CE and abandoned around the year 67 when the Galilee went into the war with the Romans. So why it was suggested to be a synagogue? First of all, because it is a public structure. The difference between a public structure and a private structure is the divisions to room. You don't need, in a public space, you don't need to divide it to rooms because you want everyone to be together. In a private dwellings, you want to divide it. You want the kitchen, you want the guest room, you want the children room, child room, and the TV room, you want the basement.
The Nintendo room.
Yes, exactly. So houses are always divided into small units. Here we have a large space, especially 2 rows of benches around the walls. It means that people were sitting here all around the building. For us as archaeologists who are trying to research and to study Jewish life in the Second Temple period, this is already enough to suggest carefully but strongly that this is a synagogue, a place where Jews gathered on the Shabbat and reading the Torah and study the law. Priests, ceremonies, sacrifice. This was the route to connect to God. The synagogues were gathering places for Jews to sit, to read, to listen to the Torah and study the law. Therefore, people are sitting together. That's the reason we identify these buildings as synagogues, as well as this one at Gamla, but here there's something else. Just a few months ago, another synagogue was found here at Magdala, another neighborhood, smaller one, not as fancy as this one. And we have, I myself excavated a smaller one in an isolated Jewish farmstead from the 1st, 2nd century. This owner built a little synagogue for his family and his workers. Again, a much smaller building, but with benches around the walls, no divisions to rooms, and that means that this is a gathering place of his people, family and workers in his farmstead.
Mm-hmm. So, Professor, what are the chances that Jesus and even Mary Magdalene worshipped in this synagogue that we're standing in now?
To answer, the good answer for this, we have to excavate all Magdala and to see how many more synagogues there are. And if there is a large central one, that could be the place. When we had this one, it said that's the only one, but now we have another one. But I do believe that what is told in the New Testament, that Jesus was going to the villages and visited and going into the synagogues, it could be at this one, it could be at that one, it could be in all of them, visit them during the Shabbat. He was going from Nazareth to Capernaum. That's a good place to be here, and especially if Mary Magdalene came from here.
Yeah, wow, it's so interesting and obviously always evolving. Now you have more work. Now this was discovered across the street. There's a lot more to be uncovered and hopefully providing more answers to our history.
That's the secret of archaeology. We know nothing until we dig.
Professor, thank you so much for your time and your very insightful explanation of Jewish life in the Galilee.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're so happy now to be joined by Marcela Zapata Meza, the Director of Archaeology here at Magdala. Hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Welcome for Magdala.
Mucho gusto. Nice to meet you. So tell us what we're seeing here. We're seeing a lot of mikvahs. Yes. Explain the meaning and how old they are.
We have here 4 mikvahot. That is meaning that is steps, hole with a step, and it's an installation for the Jewish community who live here in the past to use for make immersions. But immersion like purity, spirituality, not like a common bath. It's a ritual bath, and the Jewish community use until today to make pure in some moment, in some specific time in the year, and also when they are in contact with the impurity people or impurity. And these mikvahot are very unique because they are the only mikvahot in all of the Israel, in all of the history, that have the water that came from underground water. The Mishnah say that is different levels of the purity in the water. And the Mishnah say the most purity level of the water is the water that came on the ground. And we have behind us the Arbel mountain, and we have the line of the tree that we can see over there. And this is the spring water, and all the water came directly for the Arbel and also for the Wadi.
Wow.
And this is the only mikvaot that give for the Jewish community in the Hasmonean period, that is the beginning of this settlement, until the 2nd century Common Era. The water to be pure and to be like a reborn.
Explain to our viewers the mikvahs during the Hasmonean times, which was, 2nd, 3rd century BCE.
Yes.
Were these being used then?
Yes. This the first community, the Jewish community who made the first settlement in Magdala, I think they decide this land for the water sources, because the most important for the Jewish community was to have the mikveh. If they don't have the raining water, they need to find another sources. And in the Hasmonean time, that is meaning the late Hellenistic period, the Jewish community here start to make this kind of installation because they know before that the water came directly for the underground water. And this is the four mikvaot were in use since the Hasmonean time until the 2nd century after Common Era.
I think it's interesting to note that the women were able to use these mikvahs during this time.
Yes. The historian asks me all the time if we can know if one building was used for the men and the other building with 2 mikvaot also they use for the women. We don't have evidence to say that this building is for the woman and the other for the men, but it's more logical to think that in this time the woman need to be more use more time the mikvaot, and we can to think that one of these buildings was for the woman and the other for the men's, but we don't have evidence. If we found some right source to say this mikvaot used for the woman and the other, but in this moment we don't have evidence to say this building and the other building. Just we know that we have 4 mikvaot in one building and the other 2 in another building, and it's possible to think the woman and the men separate using the mikvaot.
Wow, very, very interesting. It was so nice to meet you, and thank you so much for your explanation of this beautiful
Welcome
location.
to Magdala all the time.
We love being here. Thanks again, and please don't go anywhere. We have much more coming up after the break from Magdala. Welcome back to this special episode of Holy Land Uncovered. I'm Emily Francis, and I'm very happy now to be joined by Kathleen Nichols, the director of the Magdalena Institute and the Magdala Experience for Guests. Yeah. Hello, and thank you for welcoming us to your home.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. Everyone's welcome here to Magdala, and especially someone like you, another woman, because this is a place which is so focused on or dedicated to women and their dignity and all the wonderful things that they can do and have done in the world and throughout history. So.
And why is your job such a thrill to be here, representing female energy, the importance of Mary Magdalene in history. Why is this so important, especially in these times that we're living in?
Well, I think just to kind of put this in a big context, it's interesting to me as an American to see how many people from around the world just love to come to this land. Everyone wants to come, and most people come to the Kinneret. They come to the Sea of Galilee, like we call it. And a lot of people say, okay, well, where is it that Jesus walked? Where is it where he taught? What did he say? Who did he speak with? And one of the principal people who was with him in his ministry, and this is why it's so exciting for me, was Mary Magdalene. And so to be here, actually these stones that we're standing on right now are from the first century. This is from the port. This is a port road that we're standing on. So we're on archaeology. And so who walked here? Well, she walked here. Her friends walked here. Her family walked here. Jesus and his apostles walked here. In fact, in this chapel, well, actually, it's a space which is shaped like a synagogue, and there's this painting where we have the hemorrhaging woman. And in the Gospels that we read as Christians, they say that perhaps, well, it actually says, they got out of the boat, and that's when she came up and she touched him. And so we have an image here which represents that scene, but what it shows, the center of it, is a woman of great faith. And she was humble enough to say, you know what, I have looked everywhere, I have tried everything, but with great faith, I'm going to say, I need some help here. And she was cured, and she became an example for so many people, including perhaps Mary Magdalene, who was from here. But again, the exciting thing for people to come here to Magdala is to say, okay, if Mary grew up here, and we know she grew up here, or this is where she was born, her hometown, it's because she has that in her name. And so we were talking,
Yeah, it's not a father's name, it's not a husband's name, it's
not at all.
Which is not common for women throughout history.
Throughout history, and also in the first century. And so if you think about it, you have Mary of Magdala, or Mary Magdalene. So many people think, and I happen to agree, that most likely she was from a family of means. And so, some archaeologists really say that her house is even in the best part of first century Magdala. And so she was from a family of means, but she was a woman of means who was probably perhaps running the family business, managing the economy, really making a name for herself. Beautiful, a woman. I mean, that's what they always said throughout history, right? But not necessarily with this bad reputation of being a prostitute or a terrible person. But most people come here and say, okay, well, let me see. There's a mosaic chapel upstairs which shows Mary Magdalene in an encounter with Jesus and these 7 demons coming out of her, because that's what it says in the gospel. She was cured of 7 demons. And so you're like, what on earth is this?
What is that exactly?
Yeah, I mean
she had a bad day, or 7 moods in one day made him demon,
Exactly.
Women have a lot of emotions in a day.
Well, I would actually say that people have a lot of emotions.
People.
Yes, it's just women, because they're so passionate many times and they're so sensitive and so naturally people-centered. I mean, you've got men that are like that, women that are like that. But she had a lot of, we could call them modernly, monkeys on her back, maybe addictions, maybe ways of being that were really damaging her and damaging people around her. If you've got money, you've got power. If you're beautiful, you can be very vain and you can look for, yourself. You're not looking at others, you're not always helping others, right? You might be somebody people are looking to, but what is it that the Lord did when she met him? Okay, maybe her vanity, her pride, her greed, her laziness, her lust. I mean, who doesn't have that? Come on. All of us.
People just don't want to admit it.
Exactly.
Right.
But there was something in her, being a leader, being a person who was a point of reference, that, was changed when she met the Lord. But the most important thing is she was free to actually be who she really was. And her influence is something that didn't just remain in the first century. If you ask anyone around the world, they'll tell you stories. I think of Magdalene. I'm a Magdalene. It's incorporated into vocabulary of cultures and languages. People have this word that has a connotation. Her influence has gone way past her time frame, way past this little tiny place.
Way past the other apostles.
Okay, and that's why, you've probably heard, she's called the apostle to the apostles.
Right, well, and that's the other thing, what does it say about her, that she was the one that was there, she witnessed the crucifixion, she witnessed the resurrection. Obviously, they had some kind of relationship, whatever it may be, that would make sense that people were maybe jealous of, maybe the men were jealous, and then everything also got taken out of context.
Oh, it's easy to take something like that out of context, even today. You know, if you see a married man and a married woman that are close friends, it's like, oh, there's got to be something going on. And that's probably the biggest thing we even hear in Magdala. Oh, we heard that she's, you know, the spouse of the Lord. And it's like, well, not in that sense. Why? Why? If probably in her single life, she didn't have to find her identity in a sense, in her husband or in her father or whatever. Why in that way? But she did find her identity and her power and her influence all over these centuries because of the changing encounter that she had with a person who helped bring out her true dignity,
which is
and freed her,
and what
right?
you know, the Creator wanted her to be, because she also went on to be a great teacher in her own right, and almost
well, see,
like
that's why.
You know, do you believe that to be true? That she was a teacher in her own right, and most likely she's from a wealthy family. She
for sure.
knew Torah. She was able to read in a time people were illiterate.
I honestly do think that, because, in fact, if you look, there's a cute little book that they have published from Magdala, which shows Mary Magdalene as a little girl going to the synagogue, the first century synagogue we have here on site, learning, because there's really, it might not be the most common, but if you're from a well-to-do family, and if you have, you know, a name and a sort of a point of reference in and of yourself, why wouldn't she be? And there's a lot of history and tradition that goes back to that. But the reason she's called the apostle to the apostles, and that's a really good point, it's not just Peter and James and John and the other, no, she was with a large group of women, but she was always a point of reference. And it's probably because, like you said, she was the first one to go and see the Lord when he first rose from the dead, which is what we believe, right? But the rest of the men ran away. They were hiding away. And she led a little tiny group of women to say, come on, guys, or women, come on, ladies, let's go and see him and find him. The person who changed me, made me free, and made me understand the beauty of who I am.
Well, especially now, even when you're getting outside of like specifically religious circles, there's a big spiritual movement talking about Magdala energy, the divine feminine, and the merging of the feminine, and you know, and you take it in the Torah, the Israel, the bride and the groom, even spiritually. So it's,
of course.
What are your thoughts on that? In the times that we're living in, we're seeing a lot of chaos, but we're also seeing a rise of the divine feminine, whatever you want to call it. It's not just women, but it's the energy of receiving and sharing and intuition and all of that good stuff.
Well, I think you've put it beautifully. There's an intuition there that the whole human race has, that there is something that I would call an encapsulated wonder within the woman. And you could call that, some people call it the divine feminine. I would call it the feminine genius, which is actually a word I love. It was actually coined by one of my heroes is Pope John Paul II, okay? So he was one of the Holy Fathers. And he said, well, he was quoting some philosophers from, you know, ages past, including some more modern philosophers. One of them is Gertrude von Lefort. And she is a fantastic philosopher, unique for her time period, because she also, you know, being a woman, did she have a full professorship? Was she read, John Paul II read her. And the intuition she had was this. She said, women have a genius either to elevate humanity or to just bring them down. And I think all of us in our own lives, friends we know, women have a power which is very quiet, very subtle, but extremely potent, you know? And so when a woman has her eyes fixed upward on something that goes beyond self, beyond the material, toward the divine, toward the eternal, men's, not just males, okay, mankind's, their eyes are turned toward her because there's something attractive about women. And I think that was true with Mary Magdalene. Their eyes are turned toward the woman, and if what she's looking at, they're drawn toward.
Wow, thank you so much, Kathleen, for this inspirational Mary Magdalene female energy conversation. Much appreciated.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. So.
And we'll be back.
Wonderful, always welcome.
Thank you. And we will be right back after the break. Please don't go anywhere. We have much more coming up for you on this special episode of Holy Land Uncovered. And I'm so happy to be joined by the one and only Father Kelly, who we've had the pleasure of interviewing many times and just spending the sunrise with for your sunrise stroll and chat.
Welcome
Good morning.
to Magdala, Francis.
It is so amazing that you get to wake up to this every single morning. And talk about the experience of being in nature, being here on the Sea of Galilee, sunrise every morning, and sharing the experience with the whole world virtually.
Sunrise, stroll and chat. Sunrise, who doesn't like sunrise? And sunrise at the Sea of Galilee reflecting on water. And then who doesn't like flowers? Especially ladies love flowers because you love beauty. And there's such beauty in nature. We've created today a virtual world, and many people live inside the virtual world. But our first gift that we've received is nature. And nature is, we have a famous expression which says that God gave us 2 books. And everybody thinks it's sacred scripture. But the first book he gave us is nature. And we can read truth, goodness, beauty, the unity of nature. We can read all of that from nature. And to learn to do that, one of the things I love is when people send me pictures from the flowers in their gardens that they begin to notice after starting sunrise stroll and chat.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think this is part of, the beauty is actually being present is really being connected and being connected to nature. You can't argue with nature.
Yes, you have to accept the fact.
Right, that
the
it's
wind,
there.
You can't stop the wind.
Right.
You can't change the temperature of the sun.
It's beautiful.
You can't change the time it rises.
And it really goes to show, I mean, given all of the 2 years that we went through with COVID, people not being able to come here, talk about how many people are finding your YouTube and your sunrise stroll and chats and all of this. What does this say about the connection people can have to this land and to the beauty of nature?
Well, obviously the COVID locked down people and they had to stay inside, and my heart goes out for families that had little children living in 6th, 8th, 10th floor of high rises in cities, and they had to keep the children out of the corridors, poor little kids. And I was here between Mount Arbel and the Sea of Galilee with all this nature, with all this history, all this archaeology, all this beautiful new art, and it was an amazing experience. And to share that then, so that's the greatness of the virtual reality, that through that we can share it with, and then people came together from all over the world. There were followers from Malaysia, from New Zealand, Australia, Alaska, Chile, Norway, Finland, even at home in Ireland. When I was at home visiting my family, now somebody who follows every day came to the mass I had in my home parish. It was, there's a community forming. Somebody is sick and they say, or we have a neighbor who has a child going to the hospital, pray for them. And 10 people chime in and say, I'm praying for them, and they're from all over the world. So there's a great richness in the virtual world we have, but then to stroll is to slow down, to take time, to be present, to notice what's going on, to hear the water, to see the bird, to see the bee going in the flower. And that's part of a fertilization process, and that produces fruit. Without the bees, we wouldn't have our orchards and our fruit that's so good for our health and our digestive system. It's all connected.
It's so beautiful.
I have a nice line that came to me during this was, behind every gift, which a sunrise is, which a flower is, which a fruit is, there's a giver. Mm-hmm. And that's the challenge of the human heart, to relate not just to the gift, but to the giver. Because you give a gift to your child or to your mother and nobody says thank you. Nobody comes back to you. So there's a great bonding of humanity, a great coming to oneself, and a great bonding among each other as we experience together the gifts we've been given.
Right. Father Kelly, thank you so much as always for inviting us and welcoming us here to Magdala, and for sharing your beautiful insights about nature and this beautiful region.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, I-24.
And we'll see you soon. And now our culinary correspondent, GALILEE, brings us a special report where the Galilee meets Italy.
Today I'm making a gourmet variation of mansaf, an Arab dish made of lamb, rice, and yogurt. The original Bedouin mansaf was traditionally served in a large platter and eaten by hand. My mansaf has quite similar flavors but is very different. The lamb is cooked in a sous vide technique inside a vacuum bag. The rice is replaced with a local roasted grain called friki, and instead of yogurt, I use pecorino romano, a hard Italian cheese.
We're in the Arab town of Me'ilia, located in the northern Galilee district of Israel. It's a very ancient town, home to a population of Melkite Greek Catholics. During the 12th century, this place was a crusader castle built by King Baldwin III, who ruled the whole northern district from here. Archaeological digs that took place here found remains of the largest winery dating back to crusader times. When excavations dug deeper, they found relics from the Roman period. My family and I have dedicated more than 17 years to preserving and renovating this space. It's our life's work. In the beginning, we weren't sure what it'll turn into, but as we walked the journey, we realized it should be a boutique hotel and restaurant.
I was born in the town of Me'ilia, but have been living for many years in Italy, where I have my own restaurant. On one of my trips to Israel, I visited this place and fell in love. Salma and I joined forces and opened an authentic Italian trattoria. The ingredients are shipped from Italy, but in some dishes, I use local delicacies from the Galilee. Just like in art, there are no boundaries in the kitchen. Both the Italian and the Middle Eastern cuisines have Mediterranean influences, and sometimes I fuse them. Having said that, my cooking is always based on the real, authentic Italian cuisine.
המטבח שלי הוא מטבח איטלקי אמיתי.
And we're very happy to be joined now by Chaim Malespin of the Aliyah Return Center, who's going to be performing a musical number dedicated to Mary Magdalene. But first, welcome to the show, talking about the female spin, Mr. Malespin.
I'm just excited about what's going on. I mean, look around you. This is her actual hometown, according to the historical records that we can find. I wish that there was more evidence of her actually being here or being born here. We can't necessarily say that she was really born here, but you know, just how Jesus, Yeshua, they said Yeshua the Nazarene, you know, Yeshua of Nazareth. But he wasn't born in Nazareth, was he? He was born in Bethlehem. Same thing, we don't know if she was born here in Migdal, which means tower, you know, Migdal. Mm-hmm. And was she a Magdalene? Was she a, you know, was she living here? I believe she was. And the whole story of a liberation of a woman. I'll tell you what, I was almost at the point of tears this week just thinking of a woman struggling with these 7 demons. They find that in the book of John, the book of Luke, and she's troubled in a very wealthy town where you have everything you could possibly want. It's a fishing village, it's fun, but she has these 7 demons. And then she meets this Galilean rabbi, Yeshua, Jesus, who liberates her. But I think she gets a bad rap, doesn't she, in history?
Yeah, like a lot of women have, you know.
Right.
And I think we explored a lot of the history about Mary Magdalene, that she was also a teacher, she was also an equal, signs of jealousy with the apostles, but that she was really the one that he was the closest to. Yeah. So, you know, what does that say about kind of the treatment and the portrayal of women according to the male world? Not just with her story, but many women throughout history.
And I think that as her story is being uncovered, her town, who she was, and looking at comparing with Josephus's works and looking in the New Testament and saying, wait a minute, this woman funded Yeshua's ministry. She was one of those who funded from her own resources, and some truth is starting to be discovered. You know, many scholars believe she was not a woman of ill repute, a prostitute at all. Now I know there's prostitutes in the Bible.
But that was in 591 CE where she got portrayed.
Yeah, it's this guy Pope Gregory the First.
Who didn't know her.
And and he did this sermon on Easter where, well, I guess that would be around the Passover time. Imagine if Jesus was sitting there in that sermon with all his disciples, including his good friend Mary. Miriam is her Hebrew name. And then suddenly people saying in that time of Passover, of togetherness, dipping the bread and having this. So this guy, Pope Gregory the first, and he goes, and now he's called Saint Gregory. And so anyway, but he says that she was a prostitute, and he sort of conflated, as it was.
Of course, and also like when you get into the spiritual circles, I mean, this is, you know, a whole other aspect of divine feminine, divine masculine, what was Mary's role,
right?
What, you know, she was an important figure of female empowerment and being able to be healed. I mean, I think there's a reason where there's smoke, there's fire. There's a reason that she's kind of in the ethers, and a lot of people are, you know, talking about this divine feminine aspect and the women that were very important in the life of Yeshua.
Right. Imagine if people, all peoples, would look at another human as a person created, a piece of the divinity inside each of us, and to say, wow, God has made this person, whether they're a Jew, whether they're an Arab, whether they're a woman, whether they're a man, whether they're a baby. These are people who God created in his image. And that's how Jesus, Yeshua, looked at her in the way he looked at Peter. He's like, guys, we're doing this adventure together. We're going to bring hope and love for humanity. And it starts with understanding, you know, that he loves all of us. And I think that's something that's a little lost. And as the ongoing journey, and I wish we could sit here and say, we've uncovered every bit of her story. We know everything there is about her, but it's an ongoing journey. We don't know everything. Women who are needing to be liberated are now being liberated in the telling of this story. And I'm going to even maybe shock you. One lady was in a wheelchair. True story. She had multiple sclerosis, MS, multiple sclerosis, and so we pray for her there. And one of the people from here, they pray for her, and nothing happened. But we had forgotten her the leg supports of the wheelchair, so her legs were a little bit dragging, trying to put her leg up. And we eventually take her to the Jordan River. True story. Our tour group. And then she says, "When I come out of this water, I want to walk. I want to walk, and I want to be liberated of what's holding me back from walking." I was like, okay, I didn't really definitely feel like that was going to happen. And it literally happened. She was prayed for here, okay, Women's Liberation Place, Magdala, goes to the Jordan River, which is right there, and then she literally started walking out of the Jordan River. And I was like, she was an American, and later, a year later or two later, we call her, and we're like, hey, are you still walking? Did it come back? Are you still? And she's like, not only am I walking, I'm eating pizza. We're like, oh, what? You know, she's like, I had celiac. I didn't tell you guys I had celiac. I'm also liberated of that. So I think that God loves his children so much that he wants to liberate them from sicknesses, liberate them from oppression, and really so they can be the friends of the bridegroom and the mothers of Israel. And a lot of women around the world right now are identifying with her story of a woman who has the power. She's a leader. Paul's writings, he talks about how women, they shouldn't go and dominate their husbands, but they should be able to be, you know, to equal. Be together and equal.
Thank you all so much for watching our special Magdala episode of Holy Land Uncovered. We're going to leave you with Chaim Mailspin singing a very special song. Thank you so much. Any final words?
Yeah, I just want to invite everyone to come and be part of this discovery and of all that's going on. Come and volunteer with Beautiful Land Initiative, with the Faithful Galileans, and train, you know, along with the Aliyah Return Center to be ambassadors for Israel in your nations and tell the story that these stones tell.
Beautiful. Thank you again.
This is a song written by a band called Sandra, 1985. Depicting her as a creature of the night. I'll never be Maria Magdalena, you're a creature of the night. Maria Magdalena, you're a victim of the fight. You need love, promise me delight. You need love. The night. Maria Magdalena, you're a victim of the fight. You need love.